posted a photo to Facebook and Instagram, and we can go ahead and put that photo up right now. And the caption on that photo said, "A visual of why I wind hanks of yarn twice, once from the hank on the Swift and a second time from the resulting cake. The cake of yarn on the left is ideal, relaxed and not stretched. The cake on the right is tight, practically a baseball, and the yarn is stretched. If yarn spends a significant amount of time stretched like this, it can change your gauge, or stitches per inch. There is even a chance that the yarn will go back to the relaxed state after knitting and washing, which will change the size of your finished knit." Okay, so that was the post. That was what I posted. And instead of being like, "Oh, that's smart, thank you for sharing, Stacy," it just caused a ton of confusion. And I would never knowingly post something that would cause so much confusion. So I'm going to clear it all up right now. Like, if you understood what I posted, then great. There were people who did understand it just fine, no problem. But for a lot of people, winding yarn and hanks, and there's a lot of mystery around the different types of yarn and what we wind, and I'm going to explain it all right now. And I harvested the questions that came from Facebook and Instagram so I can read those. So first, let's do an overview. I took that picture because I had just wound yarn for a project, actually this project right here on the mannequin. I'd wound that yarn and I noticed that the yarn that I had wound twice that was ready to go was nice, and it really showed visually how tight the yarn that was wound once was. So when you're knitting from a hank of yarn, and this is a hank of yarn, it is essentially a big loop of yarn, right? We can put it on a Swift like this, and we have a ball winder, and all my tools I will list out and link to in the video description field. And the yarn comes from, I'm sorry about that noise. There's someone with a diesel truck across the street and there's nothing I can do about it. You pull the yarn from the Swift, you get it on the ball winder, you wind it up. I will also give you links to my video on exactly how to do this carefully, at home or at the yarn shop. And then what you get is a cake of yarn. This is a cake. And it is I always pull from the center of the cake, and this is actually attached to my current project. Now, so that is how you wind a cake of yarn. What I do is after I pull the finished cake off of the ball winder, I find the yarn and I put it back on the ball winder and wind it a second time, and that's how I got that beautiful loose cake of yarn, right? Okay. And the reason I do that is so that the yarn is not horribly stretched in the cake, right? It's loose, and your knitting, your gauge will end up, there's no chance of it being stretched and then the finished knit ending up a different size when the yarn possibly goes back to its relaxed state. Okay, so I can start looking at some of these questions and answering them because I have them all right here. First one, does hand winding need to be done twice? And if you're buying yarn in a hank, you don't need this whole setup. You can use the back of a chair or a willing person to hold their hands up like this while you wind with your hands. And likely, no, you're not going to need to wind it twice if you're winding by hand, because you can control the tension really easily when you're winding by hand. Okay. Do you use a hand ball winder or an electric ball winder? Does it make a difference? And I actually don't know the answer to that question because I've never used an electric ball winder. I always get my upper body workout with a hand ball winder. Okay, do you wind skeins twice? This question came up so many times. If you're buying your yarn in something that looks like this, you do not need to wind it at all. It is ready to go. Here's the trick that I always get asked. Which end do you look for the yarn? Because you can wind from the outside, or you can pull the end from the inside of the skein. If the label is printed like this one from Kramer Yarns, up and down, you pull from the top. If the label is printed like this, horizontally, you pull from the left, and it ends up being the same end. Okay, so a skein of yarn does not need to be wound at all, unless you want to. And sometimes I actually do wind skeins because, you know what I just demonstrated, like you're looking for the end, and sometimes you pull the end out. I'm not gonna do it. You pull the end out and you end up with what's called yarn barf, a big massive yarn that It didn't come out like you probably hoped it would. And then I end up winding it into a cake just so I don't have to wind the yarn barf by hand. Okay, so for the second wind, do you put the cake in a bowl or a bag or something? How do you wind it the second time without the cake flopping everywhere? And this is a good question, because if you're winding the second time from the outside of the cake, it is going to flop all over the place, and you can just drop it into a grocery bag or something and let it flop around. That would drive my dogs crazy, and they would think that there was a live animal in there. But I always pull from the center of the cake, and it just sits there, and I wind from the center of the cake, and then after all of this ends up back on there with the second wind, I pull it off and it's a much looser cake. Okay. Are you able to knit from the center of the cake? Yep, it's a normal cake of yarn. When you wind the second time from the cake, do you pull from the middle or the outside, or does it matter? I just explained that. I pull from the center of the cake. Someone commented, I just wind slowly so it doesn't get tight. Now this is kind of a your mileage may vary kind of a thing, but I noticed that when I have the Swift, when I'm winding fast, because I really crank it and get upper body workout on one arm, when this thing's really going, you get the momentum of that and you get less stick from your Swift if it's really going. So I'm not sure winding slowly is going to make any difference. And regardless of how quickly you're going, the yarn is always going to kind of be over itself a little bit on certain parts, and so it's going to give it a little bit of a tug, and that's what makes this, or a little resistance, and that's what makes this tighter. So I don't know that winding slowly would make a difference with my setup. Winding twice is what makes the big difference in my setup. Okay, so are you using the Swift both times, or are you hand winding the cake the second time? So I use the Swift the first time when the yarn is in hank form, put it over that and wind it to there, and then the second time from the cake to there, right? So this person is actually thinking that I work way harder than I actually do. I don't take the cake, wind it back into a hank, and then put it back on the Swift. I just work straight from the cake the second time. Okay. What is the difference between a hank and a skein? I thought they were the same, and I think I covered that. A hank is a big loop of yarn like this that you could knit from it in this state. You would end up, most likely, unless you're a very careful person with no pets, you're going to end up with a mess. And so it's good to wind it either by hand or on a Swift and ball winder. And a skein is something that comes already wound. And I only have a skein here. You can get a ball of yarn that is a center pull ball of yarn that you pull from. And I have a video called Hank Skein Cake Ball, I think, and I can link to that video as well for more of an explanation of how yarn is put up. That's what they call it, put up. Last question. So you want the yarn to stretch or you don't? I'm a relatively new knitter, and this is great information to have. No, you don't want the yarn to stretch. If it's super tight in the cake and super stretched in the cake, it could change the yarn to make your gauge different even. If you swatched before it was stretched like that, and so many things could happen. And you could knit up a whole sweater and then wash it and have the yarn relax back to its natural state and end up with a little tiny sweater or hat or gloves or whatever it is you're making. So it's not a good idea to have the yarn stretched. And another thing that came up that I didn't put on the list is people were asking me, is it okay to wind a whole bunch of yarn way before you're going to use it? And I say, your mileage may vary, you do you, but I do not. I wind yarn when I know I'm ready to cast on and I'm ready to go with it. And if it's a big project like what I have here, I haven't even wound all the yarn because there's, hundreds of yards in each one of these balls. It's going to take me a while, or each one of these cakes. It's going to take me a while to get through all of this, so I might as well just wait to wind the rest of it until I need it. And I know this gets to be inconvenient because people who are going to yarn stores want to get all the yarn they buy wound while they're there, especially because a lot of times the employees at the yarn shop will do it for you. But it does make it handy to have your own ball winder and Swift at home so that you can do this yourself. Okay, I think I answered all the questions. Oh my goodness, if it ends up being like 100 more questions in the comments here on YouTube, I am so sorry. I'm really trying to be clear with why I wind yarn twice. If you got it, yay, we got it. We got there together. But that is it for this video. I hope I've explained this well. Good luck.